welcome back to another podcast. We have Simon on the podcast. Hi, Simon.
Hello there.
How are you doing?
Fine.
Yeah, good. So we're just going to go through Simon's life to see how Jesus has changed his life, the challenges that Simon has gone through. Particularly, we'll get onto the podcast, onto one particular massive challenge in Simon's life. But before we go into all of that, we're going to do something we do on this podcast. I think we called it one time, Get to Know Your Guest. So we're just going to get to know Simon a little bit more by asking him some really random, weird questions. So Simon, I don't know if you know all these questions. I think you know one of them. But the first one, if you could teach a group of people or a class or a group of children one thing, what would you teach them and why?
Well, one thing. There's so many. I guess patience. Things don't happen straight away. And sometimes the best things you have to wait for. So patience, I think.
So how would you teach them that?
What?
Putting you on the spot here.
Patience. I think you just have to share your story and your experiences. Because as young people, as we go through life, we learn that through our life experiences. So it's not something you can... I think you just have to share it. I think, patience, sharing your life story and just showing them how you've learned patience and the benefits of being patient. Because I quite often think about the word consequences. And sometimes if we start to react and respond without taking a step back and think of the consequences, sometimes we dig a big hole for ourselves. And the situation you create can be very divisive and negative. So sometimes by taking a step back, you just think, what are the consequences of what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do?
I like it. Very good. If you could combine, now here's a silly question. If you could combine two animals and be that animal, what would they be?
I think an owl.
Yes.
For one, wisdom, and being able to be above the situation, look down into it.
Oh, that's a good answer. What an answer.
And the other one, I was thinking about a tiger, a lion, something that run away from things. But having said that, would I want someone to be fearful of me? So, but I think something that's got dominance, something that's would be listened to, something that makes a mark in people's lives.
So would you have the owl head and the body of a tiger? Because you could see everything then, couldn't you? And the wings.
And also, so combine the two, so you could do everything,
Oh, that'd be cool. That's great. That's a great answer. That's brilliant. Do you have any pet peeves? Anything that grinds your gears a little bit?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a issue with dealing with situations, and I can hold a grudge. But what I don't like is when you're talking to someone and then people just come in and butt in as though you're not talking to them.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes come towards the end of a situation, a conversation, but sometimes you might be mid-flow and you think, why do people do that? But there you go. That's one of those
that's
things.
annoying.
Yeah.
I like that. So you can either answer one of these. Your most embarrassing or memorable moment?
I have so many. I suppose the thing that's coming to my mind at the moment is as a youngster, when I was with my sisters, just playing hide and seek, and we were hiding in ditches in the village we lived in, and I think there's a police car coming down the road, and we're hiding for the police officer. Didn't come to anything, but they're one of those memorable moments. So,
I like that. I like that a lot. Last question then before we dive in.
Okay.
So this is one I ask quite a lot. What would be your last meal if you were on death row? It was your last chance to have a meal. What would you choose?
Well, we'll go on to that later, perhaps. But if I was healthy and I was able to eat what I wanted, I think that'll be a curry.
A curry.
A chicken tikka masala or something like that.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
With naan bread and rice and...
Yeah, all the trimmings.
All the trimmings.
Yeah.
Love it. So, Simon, before we get into your childhood, just tell us who you are and what you're sort of doing in life at the minute.
Well, I'm the only son of my parents, and at the moment I've retired from the fire department and just working with mission with firefighters.
Fantastic. And that's with Firefighters for Christ, isn't it?
Firefighters for Christ, yes.
And we'll get onto that a little bit later and speak about them as an organisation. Sure. So can you paint us a picture of your upbringing, what your family life was like, what you were like as a child, the sort of person you were growing up? Dive into that for us.
Okay, well, my mother was Dutch, so if anyone thinks I come from South Africa, that's the reason, because of the Dutch influence. My father was English, and my father was a labourer on a farm. So I am the eldest, and I have two younger sisters, and I was an Essex boy. I was born in Chelmsford, and we moved to Suffolk when I was about 7 years old, something around that sort of time. My father moved with his job onto an arable farm. I was a kid that lacked self-confidence. I always got my mother to do things. And there was when I left school, I worked on a farm, and we had some relations. My mother's brother had some relations in Canada, and this was around about 45 years ago. And I thought I wanted to be a farm manager, and I wanted to go to another country to experience what farming is like. So I got the opportunity to go to Calgary, or a place just outside Calgary, to work on a farm during harvest. So once harvest had finished in England, then I went there. And that's when I learnt to stand on my own 2 feet. My mother was the one who organised my trip, did my telephone calls and everything else. But when I went there, never got homesick, but I was there for about 2.5 months, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And that's when I started to grow up.
What age was that?
I was 20 then.
20
so
then.
My 20th birthday over there.
Very good. So what was your sort of experience with the Christian faith growing up? When would you say that the sort of the penny dropped and what it was to be a Christian? And what were the challenges that you faced in your early years, so before you went off to Calgary? Yeah,
my experience there was never a day that I knew when I was a Christian. So there's no flash or anything dramatic happened. I went through a period where I wanted a foot in the church and a foot in the world. And you can't serve two masters, you have to have one or the other. But, as a youngster, I wanted both. So I went to church. I've been to church all my life as a young child. And I've always accepted what the Bible says. And I think because I lived that sort of life, you tend to take things for granted. So until later on, when you're challenged with questions and discussions, do you realise, there's more to it than meets the eye. And I think if I wasn't brought up in a Christian home, perhaps I would know the Bible better than I do now, because I would have to study it and look at it myself. Whereas when I went to Sunday school, you just knew everything. So, as I say, there was no specific day or time. I guess I became a Christian when I was very young, and I was baptised in my sort of late teens. I can't remember the year, but I know it's Guy Fawkes Day, so went off with a bang.
You obviously said earlier that you're a retired firefighter. Tell us how you got into firefighting. did you always want to be a firefighter, or was there a moment that you thought this is for me?
Yeah, no, I never wanted to be a firefighter. It's never my passion. My passion was to join the RAF.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to fly. I love flying. That's why I love travelling and going in airplanes. But after I left to go to Calgary, I came back and there was no job for me, so I had to look for other jobs. So I went to another couple of farms to work for short term, then tried to sell double glazing, and spent 3 months money just pouring out, never made a penny. And then I worked for an installation company, and I was there for 4 years, and I thought I was earning good money, and I thought if I was to have an accident, and because I was working long hours, and I died, there'd be no security for the family. Now, previous to that, I wanted to join the police force, but there was a height limit, and I was too short, about 1 inch too short to join the police force. And I thought I needed some security for my family and for my life. And for some reason, I was thinking about this the other day. Why the fire service? I don't know. But I just thought that is a place and a job where I can get security and also advance my career and my skill level. So I joined the fire service in 1988.
What was the process like for you to become to get into the fire service? What did you have to do? Because you obviously have to be quite fit and quite healthy and quite active to be a firefighter. So
it's all changed now.
Yeah.
We're talking about many years ago. But for myself, I had to go through a number of hoops.
Yeah.
We had to do a dictation. So somebody would read something out and you had to write it out in pencil. Obviously, the pencil gets blunt, so it gets very difficult to write and make it legible. And then you had to do claustrophobia tests.
Wow.
So you had to go into a dark room with a mask on your face, simulating self-contained breathing apparatus, and just see if you struggle with that.
How did you cope with that?
No problem at all.
No problem. Yeah.
And also vertigo. You had to climb a ladder and lean back.
Wow.
And then you have a medical. And then you have a fitness test as well. And I think I might have had a strength test as well, just to prove that I was strong enough to do that job. And I was successful then, but there wasn't a place for me, so I had to wait a year before I was accepted.
Tell us some of the stuff that you did in the fire service, some of the challenges that you faced, and some of the maybe challenges to your faith or how your faith sort of grew. You said that your faith sort of took off 12 years ago. Yeah. Was that within the fire service? Tell us a little bit about your life in those periods.
The fire service, I would still consider to be the best job in the world. It is teamwork, camaraderie. It is an extended family. You eat, you sleep, you work together. And, I've had wonderful memories. I've got wonderful memories of being in the fire service. But I joined as a firefighter. I took a long time to get promotion. I was very ambitious when I started, but I just couldn't get the exams, couldn't get the promotion. And I think God was teaching me patience then, teaching me, not everything you want, Simon, is going to be what I'm going to give you. But I had job security, lots of different experiences on the job. I'd spent about 15 years as an operational firefighter. From road traffic collisions to people dying, people having medical situations to fires. There are situations that happen that will never leave my mind. Will always be there. And I think that's why PTSD and suicide and trauma firefighters struggle with because of those situations and experiences. So I don't know what legacy I left, what impression I left on the guys, but I do believe that I was able to be a witness on the station. And, the guys were lovely. We used to go out for meals or breakfast after we finished the night shift. We did a 9-hour day and a 15-hour night. And sometimes we'd go out temping bowling. So, it was a great time that we had with the families.
And were there any moments, you've mentioned there that a lot of firefighters come away and see horrendous things and are heroes, really, who go into places where most people won't want to go in and save people's lives. And you've mentioned that a lot of them have suffered from PTSD and suffered from seeing things that no person should really see and go through. Were there any sort of moments in your career which may be a challenge to your faith as a Christian? Because a lot of the people that sort of I speak to who've watched the podcast and seen the different people's lives and the things they go through ask the question, how do they still believe in a God when these bad things happen, when people go through these things? So were there any moments in your career, I'm sure there are, that you feel comfortable sharing about that sort of impacted your faith, maybe questioned it or strengthened it? Were there any moments there?
Yeah, good question. I believed that God was protecting me. Whenever you were, because the fire service, like a lot of other first responders, will always run to a situation when everyone else is running away. And that takes bravery. Because we always worked as a team, we never worked in isolation. You had that adrenaline run through your veins, through your body. That can be dangerous because you can start doing things which are not safe. So you do more than you think you can do more than you can really do. But I guess to a certain degree you just go with the flow. But there are situations, I remember one situation where we were tasked with actually going to search. This was in my early career. For missing persons. We say persons reported, which means that there's people unaccounted for. And I was going in with a colleague in breathing apparatus, and we were searching the rooms in this flat. And I said, please God, don't let me find anyone. Don't let me find anyone. Because the last thing I wanted to do was to feel a body under the bed or something. I didn't. Fortunately, unbeknown to us, they were on the windowsill or on the balcony being rescued externally, which is great. But those sort of things you think, I don't particularly want to experience finding someone who's unconscious or someone who's dead. But even things where you go to a fire, and another situation which is fairly local where people's houses burnt down and all they had was what they were standing in. Similar to what's happening in California now. The massive fires that are going through Los Angeles. All people have is what they're standing in. They have nothing else. Everything's lost. And I pray daily for firefighters specifically that they would be given wisdom to be a support and a help to those who have lost everything. We have still got a home to go to, but these guys, they've lost everything. But yeah, there are many countless situations I can think of. Another one was very early in my career, a road traffic collision we went to, and there was an articulated tractor with a trailer on the back on the lay-by, in their lay-by. And we went to the incident where the car had just gone straight into the back of the trailer and half the car was buried. And fortunately, the driver didn't know anything about it. But what struck me was that car had 2 booster seats in the back of the car. Now, for those who don't know, booster seats were sort of raised seats that kids would sit on. You don't have them nowadays. And I thought, that person went home, or that person left home, said goodbye to his family, expecting to see them again. He didn't come home. And that caused me to think, yeah, we do. We expect to come back in. We expect life and days to go as we think they're going to go. But countless of situations I've seen in the fire service where that hasn't happened. People go out, start the day expecting to see what's going on and to achieve what they planned, only to that day not for them never to come home again.
It shows the reality, isn't it, of how futile life is.
Yeah.
I always think that when I'm stuck in traffic on the motorway, I sometimes get frustrated because I've got to get somewhere.
Yeah.
And I remember being in the car with Han, my wife, and we were in the car together, and I was getting frustrated, and she turned around and said, well, there might be an accident up there and someone may not be going back home to their families. And that puts it into perspective, doesn't it, of how one thing can sort of take our lives away.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
I wouldn't say I struggled, but it did cause me to appreciate that the day doesn't always turn out to be the way you want it.
Mm.
You know, I guess with you in sport and everything else, you start the day, you play sport, and then you get injured, and then you're in plaster or something else, and your life has changed.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I consider also is not only that individual struggled, but the impact it has on the family members, all the other emergency services. It's like a pebble in a pond. You know, you've got the pebble, there's ripples going out, and those ripples, each of those ripples represent some department, some group of people that have been affected by that one incident. And my prayer and my vision now is just to support firefighters to cope with those situations.
And what is it about the gospel that you think can help people in those situations? What is it about the gospel that you, the reason why you think people need to hear it?
I think predominantly for myself, I think it's because of the danger that we face every day. Got a colleague called Jerry Silcock who is in New York, and he talks about a situation where he was sharing with a group of firefighters coming towards the end of their training at their graduation about what firefighters of Christ do. And it came home to me when he told the story that this was a few days before 9/11, and he was talking to the group of about 3,000, I think. And when 9/11 happened, there was something, I can't remember whether 7 or 12, but there was a number of firefighters who were on that run, on that call, who lost their lives. And everyone needs to hear the gospel. And these guys were expecting a lifetime career in the fire department. In the US, they're very well respected in the community. And these guys were sort of jumping on the bandwagon to do their job. And that possibly was their first and their last. And they died. And he says they had 6 seconds to think about life and death as the towers collapsed. So firefighters, when they go to any job, we never know where we're going to. You might have an idea whether it's a house fire, a chemical incident, rescue from a lift, or somebody who's stuck in a bathroom, or a road traffic collision, but you don't know the detail till you get there. And then you have to make those decisions. So because of that, I think, I'm just passionate to share the gospel.
When we were talking about you jumping on the podcast and sort of discussing some of the things that's gone on in your life, sending text messages and stuff, you said this. You said, even though there are trials that we face in life, even though things don't always work out the way we want it to happen, my message is that there is hope in life, and that hope is Jesus. Can you share with us what happened in your life over the past few years? And you've called it the biggest challenge of your life so far. Talk us through your cancer diagnosis and talk us through the journey that you went through, and particularly on that truth that your hope in life is Jesus.
Yeah, thank you. In 2022, I was with a walk with my wife Colleen and some friends, and my friend said to me, he said, "You don't look well, Simon, you ought to go and see a doctor." I thought, a guy telling another guy what to do? No.
Yeah.
I did go and see the doctor. And initially, after the blood tests, they said you have cancer, or you have pancreatic cancer. And I thought, okay, and that was a telephone call, not a face-to-face.
And was that a big shock to you? Because, being a firefighter, you're fit, you're healthy.
I was starting to... I wasn't working at that time as a firefighter, but I was starting to feel my body wasn't what it should be.
Yeah.
But over a number of months, they realised that I had cancer of the peritoneum. I had xenomyxoma peritoni, which was a very rare cancer. Years ago, it was about 1 in every million. Now it's about 2 to 4 in every million people who get it. So I couldn't even sort of say it's cancer I got from working as a firefighter, because cancer is a massive issue in the fire service today.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a shock. And the verse in Isaiah 64 verse 8, where it says, "You are the potter, we're the clay, we're the work of your hands." And that verse will always stick to my mind, because I believe that nothing happens in life by accident. There is a purpose for everything. But in end of June 2022, we went to see the surgeon, and he showed me the CT scan, and I was just full of tumour. My body was starting to, my stomach was looking bloated. Because I initially went in because I had umbilical hernia, and they said, if it's not probleming you, they won't do anything about it. And then I had what they call jelly belly. So you push your belly and your belly wobbles, but they couldn't even take the fluid off because they're so thick. Because I thought, well, if they could take it off and analyse it to see if it's cancerous, then we'd have a diagnosis. But we went to see the surgeon, and he said to me, "What would you like to do?" He said, "We could do two things. We could do nothing, or we could open you up." He said, "But we don't really know what's going on until we open you up." So the fear of them opening me up and then having to close me again because I was too far gone, it was quite, I'll say, shocking. I was sad. But I was naive. I didn't really understand the significance and the impact of what was happening. But I said to Colin at the time, I said, I just want to give up everything. I had a business, I had a successful business, like I said earlier on. I took that fire safety information and knowledge outside, and I just said, I want to give my life to Jesus Christ and work for Firefighters of Christ. Middle of July, we had the operation, and they call it the mother of all surgeries. Because the tumour was so extensive, they had to take a number of organs away. They took my omentum away. They took my peritoneum away. They took it's as though they opened me up and thought, he doesn't need this. Let's take his spleen away. Let's take his gallbladder away. Let's take his appendix away. And they took half my stomach away, and they took my large bowel away. So there's a lot of space in my cavity at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I was in intensive care for 3.5 weeks. About a week after the operation, they said to my wife, "There's a serious bleed." I think I lost something like 17 units of blood. And it'll be remarkable if he survives. And I said earlier on about not only the individual struggling, but the family and those close by. And I thought, I think my wife must have gone through more emotional situations and experiences than I did, because I was totally out of it. I was just hallucinating. I was dreaming these weird and wonderful dreams. And it got to the stage when I came out of hospital, I had to say to Colleen, did this really happen? Was this fact or was this fiction? And I still remember some of these hallucinations now. So realistic. But, God healed me. And because of the situation, I had this track written, and it's entitled, "It's My Life, I Hold the Key." And I thought I had the key in my hand. My life was planned. But God said, your life is in my hands. And I'm going to do with you what I want to do with you. And that's where I think, here's a potter with the clay. And I have to accept there's nothing I can do about it. I had cancer. I come out of hospital 8.5 weeks later in a wheelchair. It's taken me an awful long time. This was just over 2.5 years ago now. And for 6 months, we just stayed indoors. Struggled to walk, struggled to eat, struggled to keep things down. And I think my biggest problems is because I've had my large bowel taken away. I've got a stoma bag, ileostomy, and that has changed my life for good. Having half a stomach, I still struggle. Even last week, I had too much, and I struggled after that. But I believe that God's given me ministry, and He's opened up doors, because if I hadn't had those experiences, I wouldn't be able to be a witness for Him.
So what would you say to those people who would listen to your story and question God and say, why either this disproves the existence of God, or it says that why would I want to believe in a God when He lets things like this happen to me?
That's a good question. I think I must have thought that as well. Why me? But our life isn't in our hands. Our life is in God's hands. And God has a purpose for each of us in life. And I think that what I've experienced, God has taught me patience. God has taught me that He will give me the strength to cope. Now, I will say this. I've been to date about 4 or 5 funerals of people who have had cancer, either post my cancer or during the time I had cancer, and been to their funerals. And I've thought, yeah, God's healed me. I'm here. But what about them? I think the thing is, for me, is I knew where I was going. If I hadn't survived, if I hadn't had the operation, I wouldn't be here now. Because the tumour would have just squeezed all the organs, and I would have just suffocated, not eating anything, and so forth. But I knew where I was going, and Colin knew where I was going, and I think that is my hope. We're only here for a short period of time in life, and because the surgeon said, I thought you were fitter than you really were. That's why he went ahead with the operation, because I was a firefighter. But he often says, you did well. It's because your mental attitude, your physical demeanour, that you were able to cope. I said, no, it's God healed me. He says, okay. He acknowledges that your God healed you, but you had something to do with it as well.
But even hearing that you're mentally, that you're in the right place. Mentally, you're in the right place, as you said, because you have that hope, and God has given you that hope.
Amen.
And that gave you the physical strength to get through it, because you knew that if you didn't get through it, you knew where you were going.
Yeah.
So that maybe, in a sense, is even more proof that your life is in God's hands and He is in control.
I have to say, I don't know what God's doing. Why? But I know that He's in control. And I just have to give my life to Jesus Christ and say, I don't know what you're doing, but I trust you. Yeah, life has changed. I haven't got the same stamina. There's lots of things I can't do, like, for instance, lift weights because of the risk of a hernia, because of my stoma bag or my ileostomy. But I know God's in control, and God's got a purpose for this. Now, I know we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We talked about people's lives who have changed, life-changing injuries, or perhaps even they're dying. I don't know whether they've got 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 15 years. But I just feel that God has healed me for a specific reason. And that is to demonstrate, to minister, and to share the gospel. And that's why I feel God has healed me.
And I think those words there that you said are really true for your life and for lots of people's lives, that even though there are trials that we face in life, even though things don't always work out the way they want it to happen, your message is that there is a hope in life, and that hope is Jesus.
God's way is a perfect way. And I don't understand why. You look at stories in the Bible, you look at situations in life, and why we have to go through these experiences. But I do believe this experience has just highlighted to me the importance of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, helping people through the trauma, helping people through the situations they face in life. You know, praying with people, talking to people, dialoguing with people. I think the most important thing for me, we don't have to struggle on our own. God is there protecting us and strengthening us and guiding us. But we're here to support each other, to dialogue. And, you know, even in the men's ministry in the church that I go to at Cedars in Stone Market, you know, it's a case of walking on a journey with them, because we don't have to be on the journey on our own.
So, last question then to wrap up the podcast. If you were to give anyone listening one bit of advice from maybe something that you've learned in your life, or something that you think the people listening would benefit from, what would it be and why?
I think just what I said.
Yeah.
You're not on your own. Don't keep it to yourself, because it'll be like a bomb. It'll be like cancer. It'll just spread and spread and spread and explode and it become out of control. If there's issues that you have, if there's concerns that you have, share it with someone. Now, you have to build up a trust with someone, because obviously if you dialogue anything with anyone, you don't want that to be part of a gossip. You need to trust that person to keep it to yourself. And I hope people can trust me with that. But I think it's share it with someone, because a problem shared is a problem halved most of the time. But also pray about it as well. Pray that God will give you the strength to cope with whatever you're facing. I don't know what people are going through, because I'm not in their mind. God knows. But God has helped me. God has protected me. And God's given me the opportunity to be able to share my testimony, my experience. And I hope and pray that, you know, what I've said and shared will be a help and support to people. And I'm here to talk to anyone who wants to talk about their faith or their cancer journey or whatever.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Simon.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, thank you for being willing to open up and share about what's happened in your life and what Christ has done in it. I think one thing for me, listening to your life, and hopefully people listening to it on the podcast as well, is that one thing reigns true, that whatever circumstances you're through, your faith remains steadfast and your faith remains the same. And if people are listening or watching and have stumbled across the podcast and you want to find out more and know more as to why someone like Simon's faith is steadfast regardless of situations and circumstances, then don't hesitate to get into contact, but also research for yourself who Jesus is, what the Christian faith is all about. And when you do that, I'm sure that the God who created you and knows you will reveal himself to you. Amen. So thank you, Simon, for being willing to share with us.
Thank you for the opportunity.